Perfect. All right, I'll get everybody to join in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call. Let's see. It looks like everyone is in attendance with the exception of maybe Commissioner Jed. Uncle Jed, are you there?
It does not look like Jed's on right now.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to our work session. Charlie, who do we got from staff? I see you're on here. I see that Felix is on here. Is that, and the chambers, do we have folks in the chambers or anything tonight? Does anybody know?
We do. We've got a couple of people in the crowd today, and we also have our legal. We've got Liam here, and we've got Marta here doing minutes.
Very good. Well, on that note, we'll start out with our first work session item, WS1, a discussion with Ed Grampp, the developer of Riverbend Cluster Subdivision, over preliminary conditions of approval, and a chance for Mr. Grampp to get a better understanding of what would adequately satisfy the conditions related to the irrigation water that were added by the planning commissioners, I presume, in the last meeting.
Yes.
Felix, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Favero. It's a pleasant evening to be meeting over the Zoom. I'm glad to see everybody here attending. And what I'll probably do is turn the time over mostly to the developer, Mr. Ed Grampp, and I can, as a couple of aids to kind of guide this discussion, would be the notice of decision, and on that notice of decision you can see all the conditions of approval, but I'll also bring up the PowerPoint presentation that has some maps and also the subdivision layout, and so that way we can kind of have some visual context with this conversation. And also, just to kind of put this out there, if there's any of the planning commissioners that would like any other material, whether it be maps or something that can help you kind of visualize the topic, I'd be happy to also bring those up on Zoom. So yeah, what I'll probably do is just start with the notice of decision, and then we can have some focused discussion on each point of the notice of decision.
Very good.
Okay. So yeah, here it just kind of shows the date that this item was heard for preliminary subdivision approval. This is a cluster subdivision, and yeah, with that I'll probably just invite Ed to come up to the stand, unless you have any questions for me before I turn it over. Alrighty.
Yeah, I just need some. Planning Commissioners, my name is Ed Grampp, and I'm the developer of the Riverbend Subdivision. I really appreciate your willingness to entertain a little discussion here this evening. What I'm trying to do is just make sure that I understand the procedure, and that I am going to give you the decision-making tools, whether they be analytical or otherwise, that you would need in order to render a decision when we come to you with final plat approval. And many of the items here on the notice of decision were straightforward, and we've actually already done quite a bit of work on these, but some I just wanted to make sure that if there's something that you need or want, that I'm meeting your needs and understand what I need to do in order to get the final plat approved. The first one dealt with the Taylor Weber water and the fact that they need to approve the plat. I've been meeting with them. I've been to 3 board of directors meetings, and in fact met as recently as this morning with Ryan Rogers over there. And definitely they are very interested in it. They're extremely interested in the secondary water solution because they do not want to be in a position where they have to take over a secondary irrigation system that doesn't work. One question I had on that was, it says that the final letter, you will need to have that, or excuse me, we will need to have that before the subdivision can be recorded to Planning Commission. I'm assuming that it's okay to have some conditions, for example, you know, that we are going to pay, you know, the amounts that are owed in order to get the subdivision plat approved after the plat has been approved. But that would be a condition of approval. Is that how it works up here? In other words, I'd like to get the plat approved and then, you know, they'll approve it, but I don't want to pay the fee if the plat's not going to be approved. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah. Yeah. As far as that goes with the connections to the utility companies, we would have to essentially just work it out with the utility companies. I would hope that they're not charging the full fee prior to final plat approval. Mm-hmm. And we can work with Mr. Rogers or whoever else the utility company is to try and set up an arrangement so that you're not paying the full connection fee until the plat is, after the plat is approved.
Yeah. And I've always had a discussion with him, and he seems to, you know, be fine with that kind of an approach.
Yeah. As far as our ordinance goes, we would just essentially need to sign off from them that they're comfortable with the final plat and with the improvement drawings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure.
And
Chair,
Yes.
this is Brent.
Yes, go ahead.
If maybe I can address some of the stuff on this question, and I just wanted to declare so that everybody on here knows. I also chair the board for Taylor West Weaver Water. I don't have any conflicts or anything, but just to put that out there as per legal's advice. If you want to take action on that or just want me to keep moving forward.
Commissioners? I don't see a problem with it, Commissioner Edwards. There's been nothing that I can tell that's been in anyone's advantage here. So I think we're good. Mr. Grampp, do you have a problem with it?
no, I think I mean, as long as, you know, we can pay the fee once we have a plat and ready to go. And
Well,
my conversations, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The way that they procedurally work it and why that's on there as a condition, what they normally require you to pay prior to final is that water rights fee. And I'm sure that's why that condition's listed. So basically you pay the water rights fee, which says, you know, you're gonna have the water, but that's before Ryan will go and sign that plat, is where that comes into play.
And that's my understanding too, is that, in other words, we would get a plat approved. I mean, the recommendation would come from Taylor West, if I understand it correctly, that, you know, they approve, you know, the plat. They've obviously looked at the engineering and they've looked at the, you know, culinary and secondary. They're saying that, you know, they want to make sure that they're particularly comfortable with the secondary because they don't want to be stuck with, you know, providing that service in the event that it failed. And so, but what I understand is they'll approve it. And then before we record it, we will obviously have to give them the water fee before they'll sign it and get recorded.
Yep, that's exactly how it works. So
good, we're cool. Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
Okay. Anything else on one? Number 2, a street tree landscaping plan. We've already submitted that to the county. I didn't know if there were any specific things other than just the usual requirements of the county, or if there's anything specific that you would be looking at in this particular subdivision.
As far as our requirements go, I think we'd be just looking at what the species is. I
Yep.
think our ordinance, I think, sets out how far apart the tree should be. So we're just
It does.
essentially looking at what the species is.
Right.
The other thing that we want to look at is ensuring that our county engineer is comfortable with the location of the planting. In recent past, our county engineer has become a little bit concerned about trees in the public right of way. If I remember how the cross sections of these streets are going to be laid out, it's going to be more of a rural standard. So there might not be as much, curb and gutter or anything like that if a tree were to, the roots were to grow in and ruin drainage facilities and curb and gutter. That has been a concern of our county engineer. One thing that we have done, or at least consider doing for other developers, is moving the trees into the yard. So even though they are required trees, they might be just over the property line as opposed to in the public right-of-way where they might cause devastation to the street.
Good. Okay, good. I appreciate those points. That's going to be good. Look forward to working with staff on that.
Perfect.
Anything else from Planning Commission on that? Okay.
Or is it
go ahead.
okay if one question, just because Charlie brought it up. Now, maybe I'm getting these confused, but I thought that we were going with curb and gutter and sidewalk for all of these new developments. But you mentioned that this would just be rural. But I believe that was a condition for this one, or maybe it was for a different one, and we missed this one.
It may be. We're retooling our cross section for rural streets, especially rural residential streets. One thing that we've heard from the public is that curb, gutter, and sidewalk is a very suburban or urban landscape, and they'd rather see their roads a little more rural, at least in feel. As far as functionality goes, they're still going to need to function similarly. So one thing we're working on is, instead of doing curb and gutter, we're working on low impact development standards and using the park strip that would otherwise be behind the curb and gutter, including the space that is the curb and gutter, to using that as a drainage swell. And so the drainage can primarily flow off of the hard surface and into the swales. There is still a requirement in this subdivision, because it's a cluster subdivision, for the sidewalks essentially to be either a pathway on one side and 5 foot wide sidewalk on the other side, 4 foot wide sidewalk on the other side, or 5 foot wide sidewalks on both sides. So those will still be required. The big difference is the curb and gutter and how that water gets drained out of the hard surface. Does that make sense, Commissioner Wickern?
It does, but I don't think I think the context has changed since we've discussed this with the public. So maybe this is something to put on another meeting, because we're not creating rural communities here. These are 60-foot frontage, 80-foot frontage lots. I think the community was thinking they'd have, 1 acre lots when that question was asked. And I just don't think that's appropriate for a subdivision this dense. So just something we can put on to the future, but I think that's a blunder for our future planning.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I'm curious what your desire would be as far as the streetscape goes, specifically for this subdivision. It is something that Mr. Grampp would probably benefit from understanding, just because the low impact development style might even be the lesser expensive way to install streets. So just curious what your preference would be and your thought process behind that.
I just think this density requires curb, gutter, sidewalk, period. We're going to have a lot of movement in the area, and at this density, I just don't see a reason for something different, but that's up for discussion. But I personally think we're not building a rural community right here. We're building a suburban feel. So
is it the feeling, the appearance, or is it a functionality question that would lead you to want curb and gutter?
It would be the appearance and the functionality.
Okay.
A ditch is not going to look nice, and The roads tend to deteriorate on the sides considerably when there isn't curb and gutter. Just seeing what's happened up in Uinta Highlands.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just not appealing in my opinion. So this is just one commissioner talking. So.
Okay, perfect. No, I very much appreciate that. Yeah, the edge of the asphalt has been a concern of ours as well. One thing we would require if we don't do curb and gutter is a 6-inch wide concrete ribbon to essentially contain the asphalt so that you don't have the cracking on the edges. But we'll work with Mr. Grampp and we'll go back to our engineers just to verify what it is that they're looking for overall. We'll take that with the guidance from the Planning Commission that there's a request for curb gutter and sidewalk here.
I concur with Commissioner Wickern, and I missed the last meeting, so I missed a lot of this discussion, but the previous discussion to this, and as I recall the plat that I saw previously, it was called out for curb gutter and sidewalk. And I feel that with this density, I completely agree. I think it should be that. Again, a point of discussion moving forward.
And I'm, excuse me, I'm certainly willing to do that. It sounds like, is that the direction that we should go then? I know we're not making decisions necessarily, but I'd really appreciate guidance because I'm happy to do that if that's what everybody wants.
So I think what we'll do, Mr. Grampp, is we'll talk to the County Engineering Division just to see what their preference is in the subdivision. I know that there is a big push from the state level for low impact development. And so we'll look at the standards for that as well and just find out how we can make this work. But hearing that there's a specific request from the Planning Commission for curb gutter and sidewalk in this subdivision, I think will help the county engineer in determining how he wants those streets designed.
Okay, thank you.
Really, I think the LID is going to be tough to meet the actual requirements of the true state's LID manual with a 60-foot frontage. You know, even an 80-foot would be difficult to get your volume reduction to meet the V goals and the volume reduction goals in the LID. I'll echo Commissioner Wickern's and Chair Favero's comments of this high a density. I really think we need to stay with curb gutter in this more dense area.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. You commissioners, any other input?
Okay.
Hearing none. Okay. Guess we're ready to move on. Mr. Grampp?
Go to number 3 then. That's, we're to give a covenant explaining the ownership use of the agricultural land with the appropriate water shares underlined and the common area. And the Planning Commission would like to review that. I'll tell you where we are right now, and that is that we intend to have the ownership of the land be in the name of one of the farmers' entities that we're dealing with, and we're dealing with Ron Gibson on this. He unfortunately was unable to make it this evening, but we've been talking with him about being the person who provides the agriculture on the land. And in terms of appropriate water shares, actually, we've looked at a number of ways of irrigating this from a secondary irrigation standpoint. But right now, and this has just come up in the last few weeks, in our discussions with Mr. Gibson, it looks as if he will be able to provide us his river water right, so that we can have pumps right on the Weber River, which courses through the northeast part of our property. And that will pump and service both the residential portion as well as the agricultural portion. And so that's the latest plan, and it looks like it's very doable. Our engineers have already done a study for the residential portion of it, and concluded, how much water we need. And we even chatted about that this morning, I know, with Ryan Rogers, when we met with him. But we want to make sure there's sufficient water, on the residential as well as the agricultural. And I know we had talked about that last time, and I certainly got the message that the Planning Commission wanted to make sure that this was not something that was handled afterwards, that this was a done deal sort of outlined and done before the final plat approved. So that's where we're going on that. Let's see. The only so we will use the river right water for everything that's east of 3600. You'll recall there is a small portion of property that's going to be in agriculture that's west of 3600, and on that one, for a variety of engineering reasons, it makes sense for us to continue to use the Hooper irrigation water that's in those ditches, and so that's how we'll service that part. But the other part right now, we'll do you know, with the irrigation, excuse me, with the river water. That may change, but because
I have a question.
we've looked at a lot of issues, we've looked at doing a private system, we've looked at doing something with Hooper irrigation, but this seems to be the one that's doable and feasible and the most timely in our mind. So I don't know if there are any questions on that or comments or.
I do have a question for you on that. So
Sure.
how's that? Is the river right going to be granted to the homeowners association, or how's that going to work? How's that process going to happen?
There will be a river right granted to the homeowners association for the residential, and a river right granted to for the agricultural, you know, to the owner of the agricultural property, which right now we believe is going to be Mr. Gibson's entity.
Okay, so who will he actually assume ownership of the water shares for the Hooper irrigation, sort of in lieu of the river right?
That's what we intend to do, is frankly transfer the water rights that we are going to get when we purchase the property from Mr. Hansen, and those Hooper irrigation water rights will be given to Mr. Gibson. He in turn will provide us with water rights on the river, and so that's how that would occur.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Yeah, Chair, I got one. So
Go ahead.
is there going to be like a storage pond developed for this secondary system for the residential side, or how are you going to keep pressure to that secondary in the residential?
The plan is to have 2 pumps that are going to be actually placed in the river at a strategic point, and we will provide the pressure, you know, from those pumps, and so that's basically how that's going to work. Interestingly enough, as I understand it, and again, I've never claimed to be an engineer, but as I understand it, the river in essence is the reservoir, as opposed to putting a reservoir on the land. The river will be there, and the water is, you know, available frequently, as opposed to a turn every 7.5 days. So it may have some advantages from that standpoint.
So the river right would allow you to pump that much water?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's all I got, Chair. Thanks.
Right. Now, and having said this, if for some reason this is a feasibility problem or something, we still need to get the solution. We understand that we need to have water for secondary for the agricultural land, and we'll go to one of our other things that we've been working on. That's a private system, and or, you know, working with Hooper irrigation directly, you know, to have that solution. But right now, that solution isn't available. You know, it's not far enough along in terms of its feasibility and funding.
So going forward with Hooper irrigation, and I know that we've added some new code recently, and this will be set up for acceptance by Hooper irrigation when their infrastructure is over in that area. Is this going to be an item that can directly be taken over by them, and they would assume the water right from the river as well?
I don't, I know that a couple things. We're designing, the lines and the systems and all that kind of stuff to be congruent with, Hooper irrigation standards, which are high standards, and that's what we're trying to do. I believe in this case this would probably not be a candidate for future acquisition by Hooper irrigation, in terms of the water rights that are in the river. I think this is a substitute for the water that courses through the Hooper irrigation ditches, with the one exception being the part that goes through the irrigation ditches that's going to water the secondary water to the western portion of the agricultural space.
On the west side of 3600.
Yeah, that's correct.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So I don't understand water rights as well as many of you. Is there a limit to how much can be pumped with this? Is it a quantity that it's allowed? How does that river pumping right work?
Again, I wish Ron were here, but my understanding is, well, first of all, we're going to do 2 studies. The first study we've already done, and that's as to the residential. And Mr. Gibson will have to, have something to back up the amount of water that he needs in order to provide water to his agricultural portions. Certainly there's some sort of limit to it, I would guess, but I certainly am not an engineer. And if that's a question that you have, it's probably one that I'm guessing, but I can't answer specifically.
Well, and the question comes up, and I think that Commissioner Edwards kind of touched on this, and this is probably at this point more information for you to get, Mr. Grampp, and that is, if this is on a 7.5-day turn, then yes, there's a limited quantity. And so in other words, the subdivision may not have access to this water, 7 days a week. They may only have access to it for a certain amount of hours every 7.5 days. And so those are kind of some, probably some things that you'll want to explore and make sure you have answers to. I know that they put a dam in the river just east of 4700 West that will probably push the water up far enough to the east in the river so that you have water there. But I also know that the irrigation company that provides that dam, they're on either 6.5-day or 7.5-day turns because it's all gravity flow. It's pumped out of the river, but then from there it's gravity flow. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to make sure is understood as you create this agreement going forward, and make sure that it works, the way that you are planning to have it work for your subdivision needs.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good comment. And again, right now it seems as if it would work, but there's some details that need to be worked out on that. I'll certainly have the answers when we get to final plat.
Excuse me, I had a question.
Yeah.
Who's going to maintain this whole system?
Can you repeat that one more time, Bruce? We had a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, who's going to maintain this system?
I think I talked about this when we got the preliminary plat approval, but what we're going to do is we're going to have a professional water company that's going to maintain the system. And we've already, in fact, talked to some people who have unbelievable credentials in terms of doing this. So we will have, first of all, we're going to set up the water company, the HOA will be set up so that it's done very professionally, so that, that they'll have some teeth in it in terms of collections and management and things of that nature. We will also have this expert in water maintenance that we've already talked to, and they've given us some preliminary ideas and numbers. So they will be taking care of it. Now, I know that's true with respect to the residential. I believe that in my discussions with Mr. Gibson, that he's talking about, in terms of the agriculture, he feels like he can do a good job at that himself. But I would assume that we'd still have some oversight to make sure that that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, one more question if it's okay.
Go ahead.
So there is a possibility in West Weber and all of Weber County and all of Utah that there just will not be enough water to be found for some of these developments. Charlie, this is probably for you and the developer. Is it possible to do a zero-scape front yard and to specify zero-scape and see if it can be, if it can be done, but with, zero-scape that's well delineated, weed barrier rocks, so we don't end up with weed gardens. Is that something that can be allowed in Weber County at this point with our ordinances? Is that a possibility? Just an avenue to consider maybe.
Absolutely, it is something that can be allowed. And after our discussion in your last meeting about this, I did bring this up to Mr. Grampp, and so there was a little bit of consideration and back and forth. So I'd be interested, Mr. Grampp, in hearing what your thoughts are there.
Part of what we need to do is create something that A, is aesthetic, and B, that's accepted by the public. And I've talked to my customers who are basically the builders and everything, and they have some concerns about doing zero-scape and whether it's feasible, acceptable, that type of thing, and whether it would put us at a competitive disadvantage. Having said that, we certainly want to try to minimize water. It's of no benefit to us to use more water than what we need, and we want to pinch that penny, so to speak, as much as we can. But I've not heard that it's going to work with the market here, the demand in terms of zero-scaping. Doesn't seem to have been something that's successfully done with my customers, so to speak.
I'm curious whether or not any of those contractors would be looking at this through the lens of, sometimes zero-scape gets confused with no plans, and so perhaps, well, these are pretty small yards and they're small front yards, and so that may be a limiting factor on its own. But I'm curious whether or not having a landscape plan where maybe it's 50% or no more than 50% turf grass, or no more than some percentage of the front yard should be limited on how much turf grass can be there, or water guzzling plants. What would you think about that?
I'm willing to look at things I think that are reasonable, but also that are that
Financially usable.
I can't develop something that won't be accepted by the
Right.
public. But you're right. We are not going to have huge yards. I think we figured something like 5,000 feet of irrigable sod in the yards, and so it's not huge. I'm certainly willing to look at things. I appreciated our conversation. I thought it was very earnest, but I just, at this point in time, I'm very concerned about going to that extreme. Certainly we'll look at all kinds of measures. I mean, I'm all for it.
Okay.
So
Perfect. And Commissioner Wickern, to part of your question, there is no mandatory requirement for turf grass. I know some jurisdictions require at least X amount of turf grass be in a yard. For residential development, there is no mandatory minimum. And so if any of the landowners chose to do zero-scaping, there would not be an ordinance they'd be in violation of.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. And I was thinking more, some grass in the backyard and the front yard, more zero-scapes, some sort of, I don't know. If not now, I think it's probably what the future holds. But I hope people will become more open to it, because it might be all that's available eventually when the water gets more expensive. So maybe right now it's not marketable, and I understand that. But as water becomes more of a premium, it might be more of a luxury. We'll see how long it takes to build these and how soon that turns around. So.
sure. Well, I appreciate all these comments. It's certainly well taken, and I'm all for preserving water. It's a scarce resource. It's the new gold. So Let's see, I think those were the comments that I had with respect to that one. Are there any other comments on number 3 there? Okay, if not, if I could go to number 4, and that is the desire to demonstrate that we have viable agricultural land. From the moment that we became aware of this property, and then we became aware that we could purchase the property, the first thing we did was we talked to the owner of the property, and we said, where have you been successful at irrigating the property and growing crops? And he told us, and it basically mirrors the way that we're trying to develop the property, and that is there's a good band of ag on the east. On the west side of 3600, there's a good agricultural land there. And then we looked at overhead maps. We looked at the NRCS. Did I get those? I think that's correct. NRCS, right? It's not NCAA or anything. So, but the NRCS, we looked at those maps and tried to determine what kind of soil types we had so that we could understand that as well. And we have been told by everybody who's looked at this that, I've gotten comments like no brainer and good job and stuff like that. We've also done a study that, by a consultant that took a more in-depth look at the NRCS data. And again, that seemed to support the way that we're trying to develop this in the 2 swaths, and even the amount of land that we have and the dimensions and everything were supported by that. I guess I feel like we've pretty much done everything, just about everything we can there. And I'm just wondering, is there anything else that's going to be required to demonstrate that it's viable ag? And I will make up one other comment too, and that is that if Mr. Gibson were here, he would indicate that he intended to use all of the land for agricultural purposes and felt like he could do it and do a good job of it.
Commissioners, any comments on this?
Chair, I believe the concern was it wasn't viable if it didn't have water. So I think the concern wasn't where, and Commissioner Edwards can correct me on that, but I think that was the main concern, is making sure that it was viable by having water, which we've addressed earlier. So.
Fair enough. Okay. Okay, I think I understand 5 and 6. Unless there's something that I'm not understanding there. I mean, I think we're going to have to work with your capable legal staff, making sure that we've got the documents to say what they're going to say. And we intend to use one of the best CC&R drafting firms in the state. So I think those are, I don't see an issue there unless anybody has any further comments on 5 and 6. 7, engineering shall approve the secondary water storage plan. I'm assuming what the desire here was to have the county engineer take a look at the water studies that we're doing and our water plan and weigh in on that. Is that what we're talking about here on the agricultural space? And
Yeah, just making sure the planning commission was comfortable with the overall plan for that.
okay, right, because we will be working, very closely with engineering and also with Taylor West, making sure that we're doing something that makes sense. And to the extent that I guess Hooper Irrigation is involved, we'll try to work with all of them. But it sounds like this is an additional requirement that you'd like, so that everybody feels comfortable.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Any other comments on that? Okay, appreciate your time here. Second road stub to the north, we've already done that. Did you want to show, basically it involved, we lost a lot in the process. We now have a 97 lot subdivision, but we made some changes and we've already done that. So I don't know if you. Yeah, sometimes that, on my computer, it's slow sometimes. We can move on if you want, and we can, once it pops up, we can have a look at it. That makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've done that. And then the other one, the fire district, there was a concern, I think, about whether or not we had adequate ingress and egress. We do have a north and a south, 2 ingresses and egresses, which seems to be consistent, with the planner that I've talked to seems to think that's the way to go. And so, but the fire district, I just want to make sure that we'll be able to avail ourselves of them. Are they part of is that the Weber County Fire District, or?
It is Weber County Fire District,
Is
but
it-
not part of Weber County government. So they're their own district, kind of like the water company or the water entity is its own district.
Okay.
And so we can get you in touch specifically with Dave from the fire district and
Okay.
make sure you've got what he needs.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, we're happy to work with them. Then number 10 is the health department. This is the darnest thing. It's obviously not funny, but we had some testimony last time about the fact that there was, some sewer that, got into the drainage ditch, the Weber County drainage ditch that courses through our property. And interestingly enough, the person who made who asked the question was a relative of the person who was providing the lines that go down there and cause the problem. So, but we are certainly happy to meet. I've been out there and personally looked. There are 2 things that go right down into the river and are into the drainage ditch. And evidently there have been some occasions in the past where it's been a problem, but we certainly would love to fix that problem. And, that's the last thing that we want. But again, what I want to convey is it's not anything of our making. We're the recipient of somebody else's stuff. So,
Let me ask
that
a
ever-
question on that. So is that on a septic system or is that on a live sewer type
no, there are a
line?
couple, all the houses on 3600 are septic. So, and the lines come from the backyard. And
Drop into the ditch.
so, anyway, I assure you that we that we did give a new 97 lot subdivision. It's almost identical. It's just that we took out 1 lot and we had to shift the road just in a minuscule fashion in order to make it work. So I think I'm very confident that will be acceptable. It seems like staff thought it was a very good solution. So I really appreciate your time. I'm sorry to have taken up so much of it, but I've always felt like if I can understand what you're looking for, it's easier for me to give you what you need and desire. When we go to final plat, it saves a lot of time and energy. So I very much appreciate your comments here, and we'll do our best to resolve any issues that are outstanding. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions on this before our applicant vacates? Felix, can we get the sheet back on here, the items? Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Now we can take a look at the map.
So you'll see that that there are 2 entrances right now, 2 stubs to the north, and you can see that stub that we added there. And again, it cost us a lot, but
And that's the stuff between lot 144 and 145 on the previous
believe
view.
that's right.
That's correct, yes.
Yep. I know that's where we were instructed to put it. So. Yeah.
Commissioners, any questions on this? Okay. And then I presume we got through all of the items on our original sheet.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. One more time. Any questions for Mr. Grampp or staff?
Thanks very much. Appreciate
Okay.
your time.
Thank you. All right. We'll move on to our next work session item. WS2, Western Weaver Planned Transportation Connectivity Discussion. Mr. Ewert.
Thank you, commissioners. So as we're looking at the general plan out west in the Uinta Highlands, what we've been doing internally as staff is every other week or so, we meet to discuss ongoing transportation and street connectivity challenges with applications that we have, as well as looking at areas of opportunity for transportation connectivity for the future. As you guys know, we've got a few really challenging areas in the community, both Uinta Highlands and out west. And then we've got some that have yet to show us how challenging they are because nobody's proposed a development in the area. So I think to get ahead of things and to make sure that we've got a very comprehensive future street plan and street connectivity plan in our general plan, we want to take a good look at these different areas as we become aware of them. And then if every other meeting, if we don't actually have any subdivision proposals that pose street connectivity challenges, we then just select a section of land and kind of look at what the possibilities are for connections in those areas. So by the way, before we really dive deep into this, the county commission earlier today in their county commission meeting did adopt the ordinance that incentivizes street connectivity. And so that is now on the books, and we can work with developers to provide that. And we are still moving forward with a few other changes to the subdivision code regarding streets and street blocks, so that we can get really what is hopefully efficient and optimal street connections in the future. For this meeting, I wanted to have a little bit more of a professional map, or at least professional looking map, available for us to discuss, that kind of graphs in all the different work that we as staff have been putting forward, and then just kind of query for you guys what your thoughts are on those particular areas. Unfortunately, I was unable to get that together. We had some time constraints. And so instead of that, I've got our hand-drawn maps, which hopefully you won't make fun of me for my artistic skills. I didn't go into architecture for a reason. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a few different hand-drawn maps. And here we are in the area of Mr. Grampp's subdivision, actually. So this is an area that we wanted to kind of address. And as you look at what we have here scribbled in, I'm gonna take a screenshot, full screen snip, and I'm just gonna live draw with you guys here, and you'll be able to see what it is that we're looking at. So that's a screenshot of a screenshot of a screenshot. That is fantastic. Okay, let's make sure we can draw here. And move some of the things around from the Zoom. Okay, I'm going to use, just for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to use kind of a green color on this. And let's just make that a little bigger. Okay, so you see these lines that are here. This was kind of Mr. Grampp's original proposal. That's kind of changed a little bit, but he has provided two connections to the north, and so we've got a connection right about here. What the line that you see right here, and can you guys see what I'm drawing? Okay. Okay, perfect. So that line is, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's 400. Or is that 900? No, it's 400, right? Okay, and then this line here, it extends down to what becomes 3,500 west. And then the line that I'm about to draw in right here, as you can see, that's 3,600 west. And that right now is a dead end road north of 400 here. Okay. And so we've got a few different opportunities to make some connections in this area. And as we were looking at this, the dashed line that you see here, that I'm putting dots on, our transportation master plan that was created in 2014 shows that 3,500 and 3,600 should be realigned by a different means than the cluster that we have right here. And so essentially, this dotted line here will take 3,600 and connect it to 3,500 just prior to 12th Street and the rail crossing. That leaves a little bit of question on what happens with the existing 3,600, but we would work with adjacent landowners to make sure we had something that was usable there. The other thing that we see here on this dotted line is you've got this dotted line that kind of runs north-south here. And that is essentially 3,500 west, which if we wanted to, we could take 3,500 instead of snaking it over to 3,600. We could continue it in its general alignment now and run it actually through Mr. Grampp's development where he's got his north-south connection. Now, there are other landowners in this area here that probably have a pretty strong opinion about whether that should or shouldn't happen. My suggestion right now is to continue on where the existing proposal is of making that connection to 3,500 over there. These streets here at that point would then essentially become just local residential streets as opposed to primary collector streets. As we look at making these extensions, we want to look at where logical connections are, and we're primarily on section line roads, or excuse me, these roads are primarily on section lines as they are. So as we look into the future, we look at extending 400. Am I wrong? That is 400, right? 900. Oh, thank you very much for that. Folks in the community saying this is 900, not 400. 900 is, excuse me, 400 is further to the north there. So we look at the possibility of connecting 900 south to the east. Now you do have the river that comes down in this direction over here. You guys will be looking at, you have looked at and you're looking at again a rezone of property over here on the other side of 2700. But essentially you could have 900 connecting over to 2700, which is right about in this location here. Okay. With this proposal, as it kind of stands like here between merging 3,500 into 3,600, 3,600 continues to be the primary collector in the area. And we've looked at the northern side of 3,600 where it dead ends. And the current engineering master plan shows that making a sweeping turn to the west and connecting into 4,700 west, somewhere between 700 north and 950 north. And so you'll see that on a future map as well. So this whole area is kind of a challenge, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Do you guys have any questions or concerns over some of the chicken scratch that I have here? Okay, easy enough. Move on to the next side. Okay, this is 5100 West is here. Whoop. I've got to make a screenshot of that. So this is 5100. Here's 4700, just to orient yourselves. 2200 south and 1800 south. Okay. We've got some pretty obvious and logical connections in this particular area. So first off, the green lines that you see here, these are already platted and reserved street rights of way. And then you've got 2200 south that runs across the southern end, drawn in 4700, and then 1800 kind of does the weird little, it comes across. 1800 gets, we got a lot of development happening kind of in that area of 1800. But 1800 out on the other side of 4700, it gets narrow, it kind of takes a plunge to the south and then goes into 1900 before it connects here into 5100. 5100 then goes to the north and makes a connection at 12th Street. It goes over the railway. So we know we've got 4700 that connects over the railroad, and we know we have 50, what did I say it was, 5100, sorry, I drew right over it. That connects over the railway. An obvious connection, this little stem right here doesn't actually exist, but an obvious connection would be to continue to extend 5100 to the south, all the way down into the incorporated areas. A little bit less obvious connection. So 5100 would be a section line. 4700 is essentially a section line. Slightly less obvious is how do we address this area here? Now we've got a development proposal. It may have already been preliminarily approved by the Planning Commission of this property right here. Have you guys, do you recall seeing that? Have you seen that yet?
Yes. I don't know if we've seen it in the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards, have we seen it at the Planning Commission or just at the Water District?
Is that Saddlewood?
Yes.
We've seen it at the Water District. We haven't seen anything at the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
So they will be coming. We tried working with the developers to kind of reconfigure things a little bit so that this road could then kind of come through here and stick with the quarter section line. It doesn't sound like that's going to be something that they do, which means that this road is probably going to have to swing either this direction and ride the buffer here, or continue to swing until this area right here is a slough. And so we're going to have to find some way to kind of bridge that. And maybe what this does in the future, maybe this kind of ups over the slough gets piped or whatever needs to happen, and then connects into this leg of 1800 that merges into 1900, and then we just have a three-way intersection there. But we do know that there is a right-of-way that has been reserved right here. I don't recall how far that goes, but it's right about in that general area. So what I see happening, what I propose, unless Planning Commissioners, you guys have concern about it, is just taking that quarter section line, you bring it down, bring it around, and then kind of buffering right here. There is a home here, and so we probably won't see a connection anytime soon. That home is fairly close to that property line there, so we would obviously need to wait until that landowner is comfortable with that connection being made. But we could work with other developers in the area on these properties here or these properties here to reserve the possibility for that connection in the future. As far as 1900 goes, we've got 1800 and we've got 1900. And if you look further west, which I can't pull it for you on this image here, but I can pull it up in just a moment. You got a river just to the west of here that is going to pose some challenges. So you've got something called 1900 as it goes through the Pinea greenhouse area. That's actually not a public street. It has a potential to become one in the future, where the road would just kind of continue to do this and head out across the river. Or we focus back on 1800, because all this is still farmland, we could focus back on 1800 to get that connection right in here. And then what we have here could potentially be reconfigured into a four-way stop. As you look further west and jumping across the river, 1800 makes the most amount of sense. The West Weber corridor is going to be on the west side of the river at this point, north-south. And 1800, as it eventually connects into West Haven to the east, West Haven's master plan is to snake 1800 down into Wilson Lane, which is the 21st Street freeway interchange. So what that would do on 1800 is it would give a connection from the I-15 interchange all the way westward to the West Weber corridor at the point that is fully implemented in the future. It just means we got to find a way to jump over the river in a floodplain area, and that's going to be a challenge for us. Another possibility is to take 1600, which is just to the north of what's in the image here, and jump over the river at that point, essentially, and then at some point make a connection into 1800. And we're still not quite sure what to do on that front. Planning commissioners, do you guys have an opinion on 1600 versus 1800?
Charlie, 1800 makes the most sense. It's straight through. It gives you Ogden, Harrison Boulevard, the freeway, all the way as west as it's decided to go. And laterally, it makes the most sense. If 2550 South is extended down beyond the river, it gives good spacing between the roads. I say, the extension of 1800 to me makes the most sense.
Perfect. Okay, and we'll work with that. I appreciate that. Same with, what did we say this road was down here? 2200. So 2200, once you hit West Haven, they've got a number of subdivisions where 2200 essentially just kind of goes into a spaghetti swamp of subdivision roads. That's one of the subdivisions in Weber County that I have a really hard time trying to navigate through, and it's one of the reasons why I like to harp on this idea of street connectivity and efficient and logical connections. Because once you get in there, you have to make like 14 or 15 different right-hand turns in order to figure out how to get back out of it. That said, anyone else who's ever driven through that probably just thinks that I'm silly. Maybe it's a little more logical than I was making it. 2200 isn't the best east-west connection, but it does provide a connection in this area here, and so we might as well continue to extend that westward. Now, once you get much more westward, you get a lot of floodplain. The floodplain gets very big in that area, and so we might have challenges making connections over the river on 2200. But that's, I think, Commissioner Favero, I think you're right on par. I think we would want to focus on 2550 as the primary east-west corridor there. And if we're going to make any connections to the West Weber corridor, it should be on 2550. So 22 might just dead end somewhere in this area. Any questions or concerns about that? Okay. Any other big questions or concerns for the general area that we're looking at here? And just so everyone else is aware, this subdivision here will be providing a road that'll line up right about there and afford essentially the opportunity to kind of bring this road, depending on, when it comes to this area here, I'm not exactly sure where we would need to move it through when it comes to the existing lots that are there, but that could be a quarter section lane road that continues on, and there's not a ton of development in the area that would interrupt that. And then if Pinea ever chooses to do something different, it could continue out in that direction. Okay. big connection here is just to make sure we get this guy here, which we're going to need that sooner than later. Okay, let me pull open another. Oh, that's actually the same one. So just to kind of show you guys, sorry, hang on a second. So when we ran through the same kind of exercise with the engineers and the planners in the office, we kind of came up with this idea here. So essentially 1800 would continue east-west, and then most of what we spoke of otherwise would continue on. Okay, next. Here's one that we had a good amount of time to really work on with an applicant. And so it looks a little bit better in presentation. So on the north, we've got 1400 south. We go down to 1800 south, and we're right in between 4700 west and 4300 west. And so as you look to the south, we've got 1800 south, we've got 2200 south, 2400 south, 2550 south. Oh, great technology. Always seems to be, you know, I think it really doesn't like to work when we're on the Zoom calls, but works a little bit better when we're in person for some reason. Okay. So one of the reasons we looked at this is because we've got a development proposal, or had a development proposal, and you guys may have already seen it, in this middle area here where you see the red polygon. So that red polygon is actually farmland. There's not a proposal on it. It's, sorry, the proposal that you guys have already seen, I think, is the blue outline with the blue street. And it's between 2550 and 2200. And again, between 4700 west and 4300 west. And so trying to find opportunities, keep clicking try again on this, to make connections in an area that's got a little bit more development than other areas where we're not as challenged with street connections. So we could see between 4700 and 4300, we could get a north-south, my goodness, that's going to keep happening. We could get a north-south connection right between them at a quarter section line road. We could connect. So 2400 does something kind of weird. It goes, it connects on 4700 and it goes to the east and then makes a 90-degree turn to the north and stubs into vacant property just to the north. I believe what we did with the proposed development is we required them to reserve space for that road to continue to the north in the future. The property that's outlined in red, we did get the opportunity to speak with those landowners, and they don't have a lot of ambition to develop the property. In fact, they've got a agricultural product that they think is pretty unique to the area that they want to bring online here in the future if they haven't already started doing so this year. So that'll be something in the future for us to look at. And then, as you can see to the north, you've got a future high school. And so we need to kind of plan around how that high school works and how the access to that high school is going to work. So all these kind of, I'm going to call them shadow lines that are kind of black crosshatch that you see are just various potential alternatives to create an east-west connection that offers optimal street connectivity for the area with through streets, essentially. So as you're looking at this particular area, any questions or concerns? I went further south just to kind of see what our north-south corridor looks like here, and looked at the possibility of other connections as well, which there's lot easier and more efficient connections that can be made further south of here, just because the way that the previous development has already been laid out. But here, particularly in this area, it gets a little bit more challenging. Any questions or comments from commissioners on this area?
I think that the quarter section line between 2550 and 2200 should be maintained, and that should be a future corridor through there, all the way north. You know, at some point in time, as that develops out, you'll end up over on 1400, and then, you know, possibly, I don't know if it would be possible to get across the tracks there or not, but all the way over to 12th Street, at least. That's an area that's going to be developing over the next, you know, however long this phase that we're in of building now and in the future, and where there's going to be a high school there. I think it's important to have some good roads around that high school. It's a lot of people in one area if they have to, you know, get out of there in a hurry or whatever might happen.
Hey,
I just think that it's important.
Watch out for a second. I got to move this.
To keep that open.
Perfect. Okay. Any other thoughts before I move to the next area? Okay. Hopefully the next one isn't in PDF. We can move that a little bit better.
John, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
On 4300, where it ends currently over at 33, what's the plan going south to connect into 43 where it is in West Haven? Have you heard of anything going on with that?
I don't know if West Haven has any specific plans going southward, but let's pull up the map so we can all have a look at that.
I don't want to get you off track with that. I just thought maybe you'd know.
Nope, this is right on track, actually.
Gizmo won't fail you.
I hope not. Okay, so here we are, right between 4,700 and 4,300. Right, and we're looking further south where 4,300 hits 33. So right now we're that black dashed line that you see in the middle of 3,300 and then kind of peels off just before 4,300 as you're going eastward. That is the city boundary. And looking to the south, there's a lot of opportunity to continue to extend 4,300, at least until you get closer to the developments that are in around the 4,000 South corridor, which we know.
No, there's not.
Sorry?
Nope. That means you got to take my house and I'll go kicking and screaming.
Let's we might need to mute Commissioner Bren's mic. I'm just kidding, Bren. So if you're looking at this, we'll be waiting for willing landowner negotiation at some point in the future, if ever. How about that? Any other questions about that?
No, I don't have any. Anybody else, commissioners?
As you look further to the south, you can see a lot of developments that have been or are being platted or constructed, which, if West Haven isn't paying attention to 4,300 West, chances are 4,300 will end at 3,300 South. Okay. Commissioner, it looks like we've got, Mr. Chairman, we've got a question from a member of the audience online, Jill. Are you open to taking questions or comments from the public?
Yeah, as long as it's pertinent to the items that we're discussing right now, and yeah, that's fine. We can go ahead and do that.
Perfect. Thanks. Jill, go ahead and unmute. Oh, looks like you have.
Okay, I have a couple of questions about what you guys are talking about with 3500 and 3600 West. Oh, by the way, I live on 3600 West. With the new development that you guys were discussing earlier, would it actually align with 3500 West going to the north?
Yeah, if you look at the development proposal, if we had the ability to bring it up here, it's pretty darn close to 3500.
Okay.
And it provides a north-south connection right in that area.
Okay. Okay, so that's my next question, because if you go ahead and take 3600 West straight to 12th Street, there's a new ag building over there that I believe you may go through. I personally believe that once the developments start coming through, because it's going to happen, I hope it is forever from now. What's the chance of 3500, which already aligns all through every other county and city to the south of us? Wouldn't that make more sense?
It's a very big possibility that could make more sense. So let's have a look here. Sometimes it's easier just to kind of pick on the roads that are already there, just because they're already there. But
right. And I understand that. But then as I'm hearing all the other ones you've brought up, everyone's commenting that, well, they're already connected to this street. Yep. And that's where my mind goes as a driver, you know, to head south, have to take a block to the left and then get back on 3500 really doesn't make sense to me.
Yep, pretty awkward. Okay, so we actually did have quite a bit of discussion about this area here. And let me, I'm just gonna grab this tool here and see if I can sketch some things out on a larger scale. Okay. Stick with the same color. Okay, so we got 3500, which connects in right here. And this is where it connects to 1200, right? To 12th Street.
Right.
The engineering transportation master plan shows 3600 kind of doing this business here and connecting in like that. So hopefully we're not going through large ag buildings at that point. However, it doesn't have to be how it works. So let me kind of sketch out the thought process of this area. So you got 900, which comes here, and then it kind of makes sense to continue on until you get to 2700 right over here. You wouldn't go much further than 2700 just because you got the river as it runs through here. So that'd be a good termination point right there. As far as...
So you would actually be still coming over to 3500, it looks like.
Help me understand what you mean by that.
Because the first line you
900.
drew, yeah, yes. The first line you drew it from 3600 and you did a straight line from there to 12th Street.
That's right. That's right.
And then the other one, this one you're actually going, this will actually take you behind the ag building over there on 12th Street and still meet you up with 3500 West.
That's right. That's right. So we look at the possibility of taking 3500 to an intersection right here. And then let's see, where's Mr. Grampp's property? It is right about...
It's to your, yeah, about right there.
Ish. Actually, I think it kind of comes up like that. And so 3500 could potentially come in here and just head to the north.
Right.
Just like that, where you don't have a whole lot of development in that area now. And that's one of the primary reasons why we asked Mr. Grampp for that connection, so that that opportunity is there. Now, we don't want anyone to get scared thinking that that is what's going to happen. And you've got a beautiful home that's right here in this location.
Right.
And so we'd want to make sure that we're cautious about how these things connect. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to see two connections to the north, one of them being the possibility for 3500 to go north and south. And if that's the case, then 3600 kind of becomes a much smaller side road as opposed to a possible future collector street.
Right. Well, and this, I mean, granted, I live on 3600 West. I'd rather not have it a collector street, but at least the way you have it going, you know, not straight across all the way to 12th Street, that made more sense to me. Because the way I looked at it originally, I thought you'd bring it all the way south to 12th Street And then to get over to the major collector street, you'd have to actually turn east and then head out.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that made more sense.
Okay. Okay. Okay, perfect. I will hang on to that one for the future.
But I still think sooner or later, you're going to have more growth. You know, it might not be for 20 years, you know, but I guess you could eventually get rid of that little skew in the road coming off of 3600 and going over to 3500 and eliminate that if needed. And then still
Yeah.
make 3500 your major corridor.
Well, and before we ever build this right here, we would want to really come to a consensus on whether or not we're going to go with 3,500 or we're going to just move everything towards, move 3,500 towards 3,600 with this little connector here. And so, yeah, it would make sense to kind of just allow that to happen. And then this little guy here would essentially just kind of be a side road. If there are any homes on it right now, which I think there are a couple, it would just be kind of a side road. Another thing to think about is this guy right here, that's a private drive. In fact, it is platted in a subdivision plat as a private street. But I'm not sure how the landowners would feel about the possibility of that becoming a road as well.
Right.
I'm sure at some point in time, as development progresses in the area, their opinion will change. But I'm sure if you ask them today, they'd probably say, no way, no how.
Yeah, I just know that it seems like when you get into some of these towns that they do all these little cross streets. It's just exactly what you said about that subdivision. It's hard to maneuver. So the more lines you can get just straight here and there, it seems to be a lot more productive.
I agree. And as you're looking at, what street is this one right here? Is that 400?
Which one?
I think, so this one that kind of comes up at a weird angle, that's 400, right?
Yes.
Okay. So as we looked at this one here and we see 200 going through Marriott Slaterville, it's going to be a challenge, I think, to cross the river in multiple locations. But as we plan for the future, I think this would be a connection that we would want to try and facilitate as well. Something that kind of does that business and eventually crosses the river.
Right.
We don't have any crossings except for this one here, and the next closest one over the river is what, 4,700?
Yes.
Yeah, so that could pose a transportation challenge if we don't think about ways to cross the river as well. Okay.
Okay.
Let me know if anyone has any questions.
Thank
Sorry?
you.
Oh, no problem. Any other questions or comments?
Later.
Okay, very good. I think I've only got one other area that we've had a lot of discussions about, and I'll be back as we kind of fill out this map with other areas. But let's, west of river and south of tracks, that's the one that I want to look at here. Okay. So this area, look at that, it's a screenshot of a screenshot. And if I do it again, it'll be a screenshot of a screenshot of a screenshot. That's going to be awesome. Okay, so this particular area here is super challenging because you've got the Union Pacific Railroad running right through the middle of it right here. Now we chatted about this a little bit, and oh, excuse me, we didn't get the chance to chat about this project because the noticing was incorrect on it. So there is a project that's going to be going in. This is 7500 West right here. I drew it too far. It actually ends right about there. So this is a dead end road here, and that goes further north. You've got a railroad, which is right here. And then you've got 900, which is essentially 12th Street, which runs here and then parallels the railroad. This dead end over here is going to pose some amount of risk in the future. Currently, on this side of the railroad, there are about 30 homes on 7500 west. There's a crossing here, here, and the nearest crossing on that side of the river is right here otherwise. So you got 3 crossings, but this one and this one are not public crossings. Okay, so I'm gonna erase some of these lines so it's easier to see here. This guy out here does access the sewer facility, Little Mountain Sewer Facility, and so it could be construed to be a public crossing. However, the railroad does not consider that to be a public crossing. So really, in essence, on the west side of the river here, you've got one way across that's open to the public. And right now it's accessing it's about 2 mile stretch of road that is a dead end road. We've got a rezone petition for about 150 acres here in this area. We also, about 3 years ago, rezoned a little bit of acreage right about here for the possibility to get 20 or 30 homes in there. The more homes we put on the end of a dead end road on the other side of a railway line, isolated from any other way to get back, the bigger the challenge we have. And so this, to me, this whole area, I think, should be kind of one of our top priorities in figuring out transportation planning. And I think we're going to need to figure it out sooner rather than later. What you see here with some of these dashed lines, this dashed line here, that is aligned right along about 1400. And then this dashed line here is aligned right around 1800. And so my suggestion would be that we focus on a river crossing right around 1800, focus on connections like we talked about with some of those previous slides here to 1800, and allow that to extend westward. The magenta line that you see here in the middle, that is the West Weaver corridor, the current planned alignment that UDOT has laid out. Now, I show it with on-off ramps here, and to my understanding, the current plan is that there probably are not going to be on-off ramps. It's not going to be a limited access freeway in this area. It's most likely to be traffic signals at these intersections. So this is the right time for us to get with UDOT to really focus on that connection right there. And I've been talking with the county commissioners about it, as well as the developers in the area on working on that connection as UDOT thinks about how to proceed with this area. Excuse me. So that said, my suggestion is that we focus on this crossing. I don't think we need to necessarily focus on a lot more, but we could, because you've got 2550, that's right here. And so there is a possibility to try and get something in here. I'm just going to kind of put a delineation line somewhere in that area. You've got state-owned land because of the Ogden Bay area. And so 2550, as it comes across here, may not be the best connection other than getting to the West Weaver corridor, unless we were to kind of take a sweeping arc that kind of comes back up in here and makes a connection. And that would essentially fill out that corner of the county. It'll also create another alternative to get out of the industrial area that is other than 12th Street, which I know a lot of people on 12th Street would really like to see another way out, so it's not just 12th Street carrying the entire burden. We've got the possibility of a fairly large food manufacturer to be located kind of out in this area here, generally speaking, and possibly on both sides of the tracks. So we may have more synergy to get some street connections on the south side of the rail line here in the near future anyway. So something to think about as we move forward. In the proposal that you're going to see, it's actually in your meeting next week, you'll see a rezone petition. I'm going to be suggesting that the county commission entertain a development agreement with the applicant to essentially work with the railroad to try and get some kind of a crossing here at 71. Now, I've learned a little bit more since then that that crossing might be entirely impossible. The railroad likes to see at least 2 crossings closed for every new crossing opened. But still carve out the possibility for that crossing to exist. But while this development is being developed, as well as this guy over here, we want at the very least emergency egress. And so this applicant is working with the landowners to bring an emergency road to cut across the properties here and then make access to that crossing, which then takes you back out to 12th Street. That'll get the fire truck to the emergency in the event there is a train that is not moving, something gets derailed, there's an accident on 7500, whatever it may be, that gets people, essentially that provides for that safety need of another way in. On top of that, we're working on an agreement with the applicant to essentially put a certain amount of money towards a bridge that would cross at 1800, either 16 or 1800. We still haven't fully fleshed that out, but I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, about using 1800. If we were to work on a bridge here with them, a certain amount of their sales, their lot sales, would go into a pot specifically for a bridge right there. And I'm going to be working with our attorney's office to kind of figure out how this intersects with our impact fee laws, considering that this is essentially a specific project improvement for development that benefits this area only. I mean, obviously in the future, getting access to this area is going to benefit everyone, but it would not be necessary if there was any other way in and out of this area here. But this, getting across the river right here, will essentially make the second way in and out of this entire area of land over here. And so we would work with the landowners, any landowner, I would venture a guess, that wants to develop in this area here, to contribute a portion of their lot sales towards this 2-mile long road and the bridge, and then the connection of that road there. Any questions, comments, or concerns about that?
I think long term, you know, you showed the short term for the development down here in the west and south of the tracks to come back up and cross this what's now a private crossing up here. That still puts you on going back over to 12th Street. I think that longer term and where you're going with this, Charlie, is spot on. You've got to have access from both sides of those tracks to get down there. It can't just solely be on 12th Street or from the north side of the tracks. It's that you can get some of these trains that are so long that train will be in the way no matter where it's at. In regard to a real urgent have to get there now type situation. So I think that going, you know, a little further into the future beyond this current development that we've seen, it's definitely got to come from this other side. There's got to be access on both to that area on both sides of the tracks.
I appreciate that. And, you know, I'm always a little bit floored when you're looking at emergency accessibility. When you meet with someone who says, well, you can't plan for everything. And one of the things that I've been really concerned about, you do have 2+ mile long trains. And just to imagine what that is, from 7,500 all the way to this crossing, that's about 2 miles. From 7,500 all the way to 10,000 west, that's about 3 miles there. So you can kind of imagine what that distance is. Worst case scenario in my mind, just from a planning perspective and emergency management perspective, is you've got a derailment along that line that you know has train cars that have some kind of a chemical that, you know, causes a problem where you've got to evacuate. If you remember, not too long ago, there was a chemical spill in Salt Lake where there was a mile, I believe I think it was a half-mile radius where they evacuated because I think it was a chlorine spill. And if you had some kind of a derailment and a spill right here, there would be nowhere even here, that they could cross if we didn't look at other opportunities. So some people say, well, you know, that's so few and far between. Well, you know, we know trails derail, probably, hopefully not on a straight line of tracks, but we never know what's going to happen in the future. Okay. Those are the primary areas that we've been trying to target. And as we move forward, we'll be targeting all of the areas out west, and then also all the areas in the Uinta Highlands. Is there anywhere, planning commissioners, that you guys would like us to target sooner rather than later that we haven't already mentioned?
No areas for me, Charlie, that are imperative at the moment, except for the ones that we've discussed tonight. But I do think that reservation on open ground on the quarter section lines has got to be maintained going forward. I think it's imperative.
Perfect. Okay.
Is there any concerns about Ogden Bay?
In what way?
Can we connect to it anywhere?
You know, that's an interesting thought. So starting right about here and ending, where's their facility? It's somewhere down in this area here, might be further south. This area is all owned by the state of Utah, and it's a wildfowl, migratory wildfowl preserve, essentially. In my experience in working with them, they don't even want to see a trail through this area right here. It doesn't mean that there's not a possibility to get a connection. Because if you look further south, down here in Hooper, 7500 exists. It would just be essentially we'd have to work with the state to get that connection. There is a road. The road comes to about here, and then it picks up right about here and continues down. I've driven on that road. This missing link, it's right in here, is essentially just a catwalk for people going cutting across flood facilities. That's right there. But if there was a way to build a bridge to span this guy right here, there is an opportunity for a road to go out there. It's just a matter of working with the state to get that there.
Well, what about continuing 1800 south out to the west too? I don't know if that's even, you know.
No, absolutely. So I think this is a critical connection that we would need. All the way over to, this is 10,000-ish. And again, the state property kind of starts, I'm just going to draw it generally speaking, it's kind of in that area right there. And so anywhere to the west and southwest of this area is all pretty much lake bed. But if we can get 1800 to connect over here to 10,000, I think that is, there's your loop for your industrial area to get back.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, we'll continue working on this, and occasionally we'll be reporting back to you guys just to kind of get your thoughts on this. All of this will kind of tie nicely together with our consultant does have a transportation planner that is working with them. And so we'll be getting all this information over to him to kind of stitch together into a future transportation plan for the area.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. That was a good presentation. And yeah, that all looks good. It looks like what our future's, eventually going to be, whichever routes we end up going with there. But definitely have to be planning for the growth.
And I figure if we do it in the play-by-play football player style, we can have a little bit more fun with it.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. We don't want all that professional looking stuff. Thank you very much. Anything else, Charlie?
Nope. That's all I have for you guys.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll go to the public comments for items not on the agenda tonight. Does anyone have does anyone from the public have anything they want to share that was not on our agenda tonight?
I do.
Go right ahead.
Okay, 1 second, I get my notes. This is concerning the public notices. Charles is aware of how I feel of this. We've actually discussed this topic on numerous occasions. 1 second, I got to find the right paper. Anyway, a couple of the other counties that I'm aware of, Morgan being one of them, they actually make it a requirement for the applicant of any subdivision to put a notice on their lot that states when the next meeting will be. And it has to, I believe it has to stay on there for 14 days. And if it rains, then they have to come in and get another one from the county. I personally think that would be a great idea out here, because then maybe people would get used to, okay, there's something right there on this lot. Let's check it out, see what there is on it. And then they also had another one, which I found was interesting. They mail, I believe, from 500 to 1,000 feet of their thing. And it's up to the applicant to provide the stamps for that. And in fact, and one of the things that they write up, the applicant has to actually do the paperwork on it and find the people that are within 1,000 feet and give the list to the county.
All right. Charlie, I think we have some things in place within of property owners within a certain distance now, currently.
Yes, but isn't it just a courteous thing? It's not a requirement. It's a courtesy.
That's right. It's listed as a courtesy notice. And as far as days in advance goes, I think it's 7 days in advance, not the full 2 weeks.
On some of them, it's 24 hours.
Yeah, that's right. Some of them is just essentially the posting of the agenda does constitute the notice.
Right. But I mean, it would take away the cost from the county, because it would be up to the applicant to go ahead and provide those stamps and to provide, I mean, I guess you'd have to do some printing, but I know that was one of the concerns last time, is that it costs too much to do all that. But all I know is people aren't aware of what's going on out here, no matter what we do. I know, I've been trying.
And
so Chair, this is Greg Bell. Is there a precedent, if there's some ordinance or something that's already available and written in some language from other counties, maybe that's something we can look into adopting, because we need to do something different for our public notice. I mean, just simply putting it on the public notice website is not getting enough notification to people in the area.
So let me give you a little bit of a report on public noticing. Let's talk about rezoning really quickly. We did get a modification into the street connectivity ordinance that was adopted today. That does, it puts back in the requirement to notice on rezoning all landowners within 500 feet of the property. So that did get there. That does have to go out 10 calendar days prior to the public hearing. As far as Morgan County's noticing requirements go for subdivisions, for rezones, I actually wrote that ordinance, and I wrote it to make it really simple for the county, because the county has such a small staff. Here in Weber County, it's actually a lot easier for whether it be the staff or the applicant to do, because all I got to do is go to GeoGizmo and highlight the property and the buffer within 500 feet and click create mailer, and it's almost all automated. But I'd be more than happy to take a look at what we wrote over in Morgan County a few years back and see if we should bring it over here. I do want to, oh, go ahead, Jill.
I do know, I'm from Morgan, and so I have talked to people up there, and I do know that they appreciate the fact that there is a sign on the lot. In fact, that is what brought it to my attention in the first place. I was driving up there and went, what's that? And when I was told about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's genius. Because at least it gets it out there, and people have to, they have the option. Oh, something's going on there. Let's go check it out.
That's right. That's right. So one of the words of caution that I would give on that, which whether it be a word of caution or otherwise, is how you dialogue it with the public. Like a subdivision, for example. Well, starting with a rezone. A rezone is neighbors, come and express your opinions about rezoning the property at a public hearing. And that's an important and critical moment for the public to get involved. When it comes to a subdivision, the notice, and we addressed this in Morgan County because it did pose challenges as well. Subdivisions are administrative decisions. And so instead of saying, come to the county at a public hearing and express your concerns, our notices said something to the extent of, you are hereby notified this is going to happen. If you would like to observe the proceedings of the Planning Commission, this will be the date and the time that they deliberate. And so in effect, what that does is it hopefully sets up the expectation that it might not be open mic night at the Planning Commission for a subdivision in the same way it would be otherwise for a public hearing for a rezone. But at the very least, it gets the neighbors involved in setting up and managing appropriately what their expectations are for their community.
I agree, because I think like one lot subdivisions honestly aren't as big as concern. And if I'm right, it seems like when I was reading some of Morgan County's, they have like a small subdivision
They do.
ordinance or whatever. And so, I mean, you know, because it mostly cluster subdivisions and PRUDs, if they're still there, because they aren't getting repealed yet. Those are my big concerns in any public hearings.
That's right. And just by way of mentioning, Ms. Hipwell, the PRUD ordinance was repealed and replaced with a MPD overlay zone. And so all of those kind of master plans would have to go to public hearing, at which point we'd be inviting the public to come and speak their mind. But yeah, I don't think it's a terrible idea to ask for signs to be posted. I know I advocated for that when I was first hired here, and set up some templates for those signs. And I'll chat with Director Grover and see what his thoughts are on implementing that more in the future.
Well, I know for a fact I've brought it up in the actual commission meetings on numerous occasions too, and they acted like it was a great idea, but then nothing ever happened. I believe I could push for it as a citizen, but that's going to cost me money too.
Right. We are constantly looking to improve our ordinances, and as you guys, planning commissioners, know, we're making a whole bunch of changes to our subdivision ordinance. And so as we do so, I'd be more than happy to take a look at noticing requirements for subdivisions and see if we can get something in there that is a little bit more clear about what our requirements are. I know we're going to have a little bit of pushback and static from people in the office, but let me see if I can run a little bit of interference there and see what we can do.
And I think the one thing they need to realize, and we went through this a lot when we were trying to become a city, there are so many people that do not have access to the internet. And so at least this gives them the option to, oh, I need to look on, here, and I can find out what's going on.
Right. Oh, which, by the way, that reminds me, we do have banners made for the general plan. And so they are 4 feet by 16 feet and will be posted out in the public rights of way in 2 locations in both Uinta Highlands and 2 locations out in Western Weber that guides people to the general plan website. It also has an area with Velcro that allows us to change out the message. So the first message is going to be visit the website, take the survey, give us your comments. And then we'll take the banner down and then we'll put it back up again in about September, October-ish to say, here's our public open house, come and give us comments on what we've created, and then we'll take it down. And then when it comes time for the public hearings in January-ish, we'll put them back up again. So hopefully we're capturing everybody who doesn't have access to the internet that way. We also, on that subject, put a flyer in with your utility billing. So in Uinta Highlands, everyone who gets a bill from the Uinta Highlands Water and Sewer Improvement District should get a flyer in their bills. Taylor West Weber, they couldn't accommodate putting a flyer in the envelope, but there is a statement right on the bill that talks about the planning website and the plan. And then in the West Warren Improvement District area, we sent out 300 plus flyers for those landowners too. So hopefully we're capturing everyone without the need for internet access.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing none. All right. Any remarks from the planning commissioners?
Chair, one quick remark. I think the noticing for rezoning is very important, but I agree with Charlie that if there's nothing the public can do, if they're not allowed to, if it's administrative and they're not going to be heard at the meeting, it's important that we make sure that that's clear in any communication to the public. Because I've been frustrated by that in the past when I feel like I've been invited to a meeting to observe, but there was no interaction. So.
Right. Well, yeah, the part of the participation that means the most is on the legislative items, and those legislative items are not very well observed, unfortunately, as we've all witnessed through our tenure on the Planning Commission. And then it creates a problem in regards to when somebody has an administrative item, and then folks don't feel like they've been heard. So hopefully we can come up with some sort of a means to get some better information out there and hopefully get people better informed.
Okay, I'm not done. 1 minute. Okay, so the PRUD is now legislative action, correct?
Correct.
So that would make it to where people can actually speak out?
Correct.
Okay, so if they do not repeal the cluster subdivision, what would be the chances of making that legislative? Because I think those two are your biggest issues and rezones.
Mr. Chairman, are you comfortable with the dialogue?
Well, we've moved on, but let's go ahead and finish this up. And then we have moved on beyond public comment.
Okay, sorry.
Forward. Go ahead,
Okay.
Charlie.
Finishing this up, we do have a request by the Planning Commission to repeal the cluster subdivision ordinance. And so we are working something up to get that done. It's a little bit more challenging than I thought it would be. It's not just a bunch of strikeouts because the master plan development overlay zone actually defers most of the layout to the cluster code. So got to figure out exactly how to make that work. But Planning Commissioners, you'll see that on your docket, hopefully. If not, I say it won't be in your next meeting, but the meeting after, to strike that from the record. Just from my own opinion, I'm probably going to encourage you to keep it, but maybe limit the circumstances in which it can be used, or make some modifications to make it a little bit more community oriented or community outcomes oriented. But I'm going to give you guys the tools to strike it if that's the desire. And the County Commission, I think, is going to be on board either way, because I think that the cluster code has caused some challenges even for the County Commission. I lost my thought. There was something else I was going to mention, but yeah, okay. So that's coming down the pipeline.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay, commissioners, any other comments?
Chair, I have one.
Go ahead, please.
It seems like I'm still not getting my email, so I'm going to say what it is again. It is WANDREOTTI6@gmail.com. I just happened to luck into this meeting tonight because I was checking with Andrew on a couple of things, and he says, "Oh yeah, we got to do this before the meeting." What meeting? So anyway, if I could get that, I would certainly be appreciative of that. I do have one other item, and I don't know whether it's a red herring or not, but river water. I guess I don't understand a lot about that, but I know that there's times of year, I think, when you can pump and you cannot pump, and I'm not sure whether there's the amount of how many acre feet they're allowed to pump in a year. And I think that, if we're going to get involved with more of these kinds of things, we kind of need to know what the rules are. Because just because you got river water, what does that really mean? So anyway, I just 2 bits on that. And other than that, I'm glad I talked to Andrew, because here I am.
Thanks for
Thanks.
the comments,
We did.
Commissioner.
We didn't fire you, Commissioner Andriotti, so I apologize.
Phew. All right. No,
I'll
Charlie,
check
no.
on that and we'll get it updated.
Can you,
All
yeah,
right.
can you make sure that everybody in staff has that? I think that some folks are probably missing Wayne's current email address.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything else from planning commissioners? Charlie, it looks like you're back up again. I think you're probably filling in as director tonight. Is that right?
I am. Yeah, Rick's out of town for this week, so you're stuck with me, and I don't have anything for you guys unless you guys have something that you would like me to specifically address. I think I spoke
Well,
enough today.
Yeah, you gave him an open invitation. Nobody took the bait. So, all right, legal counsel.
Chair, I don't have anything to bring before the commission.
Thank you. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.